great thinkers have always been motivated by the enjoyment of thinking, rather than any material rewards that could be gained by it. Who do you think would walk further? Someone who's walking towards a destination, or someone who simply enjoys walking? This relates to today, as we will be talking about locking in as an entire concept, mastering the art of it, understanding the difference between locking in that's a little bit forced versus locking in because you want to, and how to use it actually as a model for happiness in a world where so many of us, toss this term around and just say like, oh, we gotta lock in, guys. It's time to lock in. It ties into this world of where we just gotta keep working harder and working longer and forcing us. And it's about who can go through the most amount of suffering in order to achieve potentially the most amount of success. At least that's what the positive correlation would lead us to believe. However, it is the goal of this video to help you reframe this in a way that you can change the way you lock in potentially forever and in all of your aspects of your life and anything you do. As you might be able to tell, this is a gaming channel mainly dedicated for League of Legends, but we can use League of Legends as a vehicle to explore these topics and to give examples and to extrapolate it into areas of our life in order to help better ourselves. As I mentioned in other videos, I use the game as the fastest means of quote unquote locking in that I can reasonably access, otherwise known as achieving flow. And I will also use these analogies relating to League where applicable, but feel free to apply it and extrapolate it to your own contexts. Almost all of the information that I will use today will come from a book called Flow, written by someone named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. This guy is basically the god of the flow state, and his life's work basically broke down how this works and explored it from every possible avenue. These days, locking in is often thrown around as a term synonymous for anyone needing to invest a lot of effort, usually with a negative connotation of work to achieve a positive, often extrinsic goal. However, locking in should not be something you have to do, but something you get to do, and in fact crave. I would encourage you to think of locking in as getting obsessed over the motions of every action, how it feels, the intricacies and interactions, and how wonderful that is, and the joy there is from being able to be engrossed and having the privilege of being able to have these feelings in whatever activity you choose to do. In this case, we'll probably be referring to League of Legends, but this could apply to literally anything in your life. We live in a society where people are dragging their feet so heavily and forcing themselves to suffer through work they don't like. And this is the case for the vast majority of people for all aspects of their life. But why not take the chance to potentially reframe it and find that thing you do like and turn things that you don't initially like or don't think you like into things that you potentially do thanks to the flow state. If you compare two people who are working on the same thing and one person potentially hates this activity or topic, but the other person absolutely loves it, who do you think will have a higher propensity for work? A lot of the most successful people in the world do it because they love it and they have an obsession over it. Let's assume there's two people with equal aptitude and you're both engineers. If you absolutely hate engineering and you pursued it just for the bag, and you're comparing it to someone else who absolutely loves engineering, who falls in love with the intricacies and how to make these functional programs and how to change the world using technology, who do you think will be more successful? A lot of the most successful people in the world do this with this mindset. They do things and they pursue the things they do because they just simply love it. And it shows. The love shows. Obviously, there is some nuance because I think there are some people that are very high functioning. They're very prolific people that are the opposite of this, that are the antithesis of this logic. I know lots of very successful people that really hate what they do and they're still successful. But like Nikola Jokic, NBA GOAT, but he is prolifically known for playing in the NBA like he's just clocking into work like it's his 9 to 5. But I could argue that even for someone at his level, let's say if he was the same person in the same role, but he truly loved his sport, I would actually argue that he could achieve even greater than he already is. There is a guarantee he would not do worse, but he could potentially do better, right? Just because he's already one of the best doesn't mean that there isn't more that he can access, right? Of course, he's incredibly talented, but imagine if he was incredibly talented and loved his work. That is the mindset that I'm trying to portray here. In order to have this kind of mindset conducive to locking in and producing flow, there's a personality type that's kind of associated with this. So innately, I think some people have a higher propensity of producing flow than other people. This is referred to as the autotelic personality. It is my personal belief that anyone can be capable of producing flow or locking in on command, but you need to have these traits in order to be able to produce that. Fundamentally, this is how you both lock into anything and enjoy it too. So I'm going to go through each of the characteristics. The first one is curiosity. So a lot of these autotelic people, they have a lot of interests and they spend a lot of time thinking about and deconstructing them, right? They just like things. They just are so curious about the world. They are immersed in the world around them versus being focused on themselves. This also fundamentally means they don't really have an ego. This is usually a byproduct because of their obsession over everything else in the world. There's too many other things to focus on. There's too much wonder in the world. Like, why would you focus on yourself when there's so many other cool things that you could be focusing on? Obviously, people with autotelic personalities also are very intrinsically motivated. They just do things for the sake of it, right? It's not that deep. They just do it because they want to. There's no goals they're trying to achieve. There's nothing they're doing it for. There's no ulterior motive. They just want to do that thing. They're also very independent. They live very grounded lives. They are more resilient to external forces. They don't really care about what people say or things that happen around them, and they don't seek external validation because that's not what's important to them. And as a result, a lot of the time, autotelic individuals will enjoy things that normal people will not. Essentially, this allows you to lock into anything and basically enjoy anything because you don't see these things like normal people would, right? This gives the feeling that life is just super rich and enjoyable. I like to give an example of this. A friend has asked me once, what do you think of that cloud over there? It's just a random cloud on a random day, right? And she just asked me for my opinion on what that cloud was going off about, right? Some people, they would just say, well, what are you talking about? That's just a cloud, bro, right? But to my surprise, my answer was like, holy shit, look at that cloud move, bro. It's popping off, right? Look at the way it moves. Bro's moving with it. This is an example of not necessarily producing flow, but of the autotelic personality, where you kind of just like see the wonder in these things, in these otherwise very mundane things, right? And it does take a lot, and it takes a natural interest in order to really produce this. And that's why I don't think it's necessarily for everyone, or it's necessarily as easy for everyone to get into this mindset. Wherever your starting point is and wherever you normally see things, I recommend you kind of take this into account to kind of work yourself towards this personality type in order to be more conducive to flow and to be able to lock into things and to have the right mindset for it. For any activity, there's also 4 critical components in order to produce flow. Basically, these are the 4 components that allow you to make this activity one in which you can really lock in and really enjoy locking in, right? So you need to have clear and achievable goals. With a game like League, for example, which is what I play to produce flow the most, you can have a target rank. Your goal could be to get better at a certain skill. You could improve at a certain champion. There's lots of different areas within the game that allow you to establish your own goals. And you can kind of extrapolate this in order to have a goal for other sort of activities in your life, right? I'm going to use an example throughout these components in cooking. When I'm cooking, the achievable goal is to cook the bussin' food, cook food that's quite good, or achieve a certain look to a dish, right? The second component is having clear and immediate feedback. So you could notice a mistake, you could get feedback after the game, you could get some feedback from someone else. It should be pretty easy to produce this. And if it's not easy to produce this within this activity, you can try to find a way to introduce a system in order to introduce feedback into that activity. So with League, it's very easy to do this because you get punished very hard in the game for your mistakes. It of course has some variance depending on the nature of the mistake, and you get feedback from the game as well, whether it's from the game systems, whether it's your teammates, or maybe it's someone else or a coach you ask after the game, right? When you're cooking food, you could notice a mistake. You could have a chef who's helping you, giving you tips on how to cook. You could notice your food literally burning, right? That's pretty clear feedback. The third one is having a balance between the challenge and your skills. It can't be too easy or too hard. So a game like League usually is pretty good at this because it adjusts the difficulty of the game according to your level, right? At least on paper, because as you get better, your rank improves, and as your rank improves, then it will adjust your MMR, and as your MMR adjusts, your opponents will adjust. So on paper, it should generally be at your limit, with some exceptions and some variants, of course. For cooking, you could choose dishes that are at your skill limit. You could introduce new dishes into your life. You could experiment with new things. This probably would take more hands-on sort of adjustment, but you can still balance whatever skill level you're at compared to the challenge you're at, and you can try to introduce new challenges. I think the biggest one is the ability to generate an intrinsic reward or have engagement. You need to find the activities in your life or find a way to spin this activity into something that's inherently enjoyable and rewarding. And if you find satisfaction in the process itself, you just naturally become more immersed and focused on the task. You can do this by connecting to the activity to your passion, your purpose, or just out of straight curiosity. And that's how different activities can be conducive to flow in different people, right? Or maybe an activity that's very flow conducive to one person might not be as much for another, right? For me, that's League. Cooking is really cool too, but for some people might really dislike cooking and it's just not really big for them, so they don't really care. The last one that's not one of the main components, but is equally important, is the ability to have that sense of control. You need to feel like you have some level of agency in manipulating the solution or manipulating the outcome. And it's not necessarily the outcome itself you're looking for. It is the fact that the outcome is in your hands. And the goal is to reduce the failure as much as possible with your agency. That's what makes it so fun. Even if you do fail in this activity, it should still be flow conducive because it was all about your ability to reduce the chance of failure and do it while in flow. So that's why you can have, you can mess up your dish and it would look terrible, but did you have a good time and were you immersed and were you learning? Damn, that's pretty, then it's still a dub, right? It's the same with League. If you tried your hardest and you were absolutely satisfied with the effort you put in, even though you lost, that's a dub too. And as you keep locking in and doing things and doing this activity, maybe you get better, maybe you're studying for a test and your knowledge gets better, right? You need to make sure there's a balance between your skill and the difficulty of the activity. It needs to be around at your limit so that you are as engaged as possible. And this means as you get better, you need to up the stakes. And if you get worse, you need to lower the stakes actually, because you need to play at your level. Let's say, for example, if you're smurfing, the theory kind of proves that it should feel kind of boring after a while because you're not necessarily that engaged and there's not really much point in locking in because you don't need to. You're just going to win anyway, right? Not saying that you would seek the result, but if it's just too easy, you're not really trying that hard in order to perform well. Versus if it's too hard, you just get absolutely smashed and you're not really learning anything and you're just locked out because it feels like you're helpless, right? That's the anxiety state. So you need to be able to find that balance and find the sweet spot. Let's talk reasons for locking in. The more common one I would think in current society is extrinsic. There could be a lot of factors for this. Let's say parental pressure. Let's say self-pressure due to expectations, or you have a goal you're trying to achieve. Financial pressure, you need to be successful. Status, maybe you like that. You like the clout that's associated with it. You like the fame or potential status that goes along with it. Some personality types understand this need to succeed and can bunker down in these times, right? They just suck it up. They just lock in because they need to, right? However, I do think no matter what, your stamina will run out faster than when you do it for intrinsic reasons. For some people, the delta between the extrinsic and intrinsic motivations is very large. If they're doing it for extrinsic reasons and you need inertia too, some people just can't get off their feet no matter how hard they say they need to lock in because they just can't. They just don't feel like it and they don't care about the activity. The book itself mentions this. Changing external conditions alone without consciousness does not induce happiness. That is why you commonly see engineers with like crazy jobs or crazy salaries, or doctors that have extremely lucrative jobs. Why do they quit? They make so much money. How could you ever abandon that sort of life, right? Objectively, you can get whatever you want. You can live a very comfortable, happy life. But the thing is, they're not happy because they don't care about this activity. They're doing it just for extrinsic purposes. Or how about the countless amounts of famous people that end up being really sad and depressed? How can you be depressed when you're, that famous and you have all that money? And this is the nuance and the argument that flow makes. When you play League, it's fundamentally the same thing, right? When you play for LP or status or thinking about a potential career, you get really caught up in the moment and you just stop enjoying the game because all you care about is whether you won or lost the game. You don't care about the skills you build along the way or the intricacies of the game systems, right? And like, let's say, for example, not sure if you've ever had those win streaks and then suddenly you're like, wait, guys, I'm like 2 wins from diamond. Like, what are we saying? And the very second your mind goes to this mindset and thinks about playing for an outcome, your mindset shifts. And then you often realize that this shift is what makes you certainly lose afterwards, almost without fail. Or I love the phrase, you can't end on a loss. And then you and the boys, they just lose until the sun rises. Like, although this is a meme, there is a lot of truth to this. Compare these extrinsic reasons to intrinsic ones now. You have to care about the topic. You're doing it for the cause, right? Arguably, this is the most honorable route. You just do it because, right? This is what flow argues, right? And when you're doing it just because you want to do it, and when you do it just because you love doing the thing, you're just going to have fun no matter what. And if you're just going to have fun no matter what, you're locking in no matter what, then like you can't really fail. And this allows you to work that much harder. It allows you to lock in for longer. And that is the point of kind of revaluing the way we see the activities we do, and also intentionally choosing ones that help make us more conducive to this. A way to phrase it is like when we feel like we're investing intention into something against our will, so like working at a job we hate or focusing on a test for a program I don't care about, it's as if our energy is being wasted. Instead of us achieving our own dream and doing things we care about, we're working to achieve someone else's dream. And that is why it feels so hard to kind of lock into these things that we just don't care about. Because why, if I don't care, how can I try that hard, right? It's always just going to be more intuitive and easier to try hard in something you care about. So the keys to locking in is really giving yourself that space to be immersed and lean into that activity and having zero distractions. Don't scroll on your phone after a death. Don't try to multitask. You should really try to lock in on that one activity, because then you lean into it more and you're so immersed, and all the magic and the beauty of that activity reveals itself. And then you try to enjoy that, the motions of just doing that thing, getting feedback, and the love of getting involved in that activity. This in itself is a skill and a mindset that you need to hone. But once you do, I do think the rewards go kind of crazy. This is why you might feel like if you had a long time of just being bored and just relaxing and bumming around, it's not actually that fun. This is why the paradox of work exists. So the book actually argues that jobs are actually easier to enjoy than free time, because jobs are actually conducive to flow, because they have built-in goals, they have the feedback systems, and everything else and all the other components that produce flow. It actually encourages you to be more involved in your work, to immerse yourself and lose yourself in it, right? Oftentimes when we have free time, we don't structure it in a way that allows us to be conducive to flow. So it's generally unstructured. It actually ironically takes a lot more effort to shape that into something that you can actually enjoy and produce flow out of, right? Hobbies that demand skill or that set goals and have a personal interest and give you that intrinsic motivation, right? Most people don't really think that deeply about the things they choose to do. And that's why work often, ironically, has that structure and feels better than recreation at times. Of course, work is still work. And while on the job, people feel more satisfied and happy and strong, and like they feel like they're contributing to something, they will get burnt out. And in free time, people's skills are not being used, so they get more bummed out. But ironically, people always want to work less and spend more time in leisure. And the reason for this is because, work is enjoyable, but you can't do that forever. Obviously, you need time to recover. You need time to kind of reset from that and give yourself space in order to really enjoy it. You can't enjoy something that you do constantly all the time. That's just leading to burnout. And that's why that pacing is very important. The more the work you do actually resembles a game in this sense, the easier it is to lock in. I had an experiment like this before when I tried doing Uber for fun. And I noticed that the design of Uber, it's actually quite gamified, and it's built into the actual design of the way they do it. And I believe this has actually probably produced some meaningful results for them in order to help their contractors to produce more work and to work for longer, and in which case it benefits them. What I'm saying here is the key is that you should find things that you would want to do no matter what and just enjoy it. These are like the best activities that you could probably produce in your life. If there are some activities that you feel like you must do, consider how you can use these metrics in order to make it more conducive to flow and to combine that with the personality that we are potentially trying to produce and what I'm pitching for here. So let's say, for example, why does Faker continue to play League even though he has enough money and never needs to work again? Well, fundamentally, he was never really playing for money. It's just because he likes League. And that's why I argue that most people, or that are the most successful in their relative disciplines, they're not doing it because of extrinsic circumstances, right? Because there's so many different ways that you could make money. And, if that was your goal, then like what would differentiate one sort of activity from the other? Well, the reason to differentiate these activities is because you like them. And that's fundamentally what we're arguing for, right? They just want to do it. So like overall, this is the mindset and criteria that I think you should be looking for when thinking about locking in and being able to kind of apply this to lock in anything, right? It's not a matter of forcing yourself to, it's like crafting your life and your approach to all activities in your life so that you fall in love with locking in. It's not like you have to lock in, you get to lock in. And that's basically the purpose of this. So that's basically my thoughts on like how to revolutionize locking in basically. And I don't really necessarily agree with the way a lot of people do it right now, right? Where like, why would you force yourself to suffer and lock in when you can just have such a good time doing it? And that's basically the mindset that I wanted to promote. Because for me, it helped me so much in kind of like deciding like what things to introduce in my life and like what things to cut out. And like, it gave me like stronger signals to understand like, does this thing I'm doing really make sense? Like, why am I not really enjoying it? And after kind of seeing it from this flow idea, it made so much sense. And like it's so much easier for me to decide what really matters in my life and what really brings me joy in my life. And usually, and this has been such a helpful model for me. So the idea behind it was just to kind of share those thoughts, and hopefully you'd be able to pick up a little bit on it and kind of like introduce that sort of model in order to enjoy not only the things that you love doing and are passionate about, but basically just anything in your life. And that was basically the goal here, right? So if you picked up a little bit on that, I'm really grateful, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. So yeah, that's basically it. Thanks, guys.